Good job on making it this far. We've hopefully covered a lot in the first 6 weeks. Now our main focus will be thinking about the group projects, right? So next Wednesday we won't have a lab. Instead, we'll have an internal demo day, right? So next Wednesday is a chance for each team to come up here, talk about what they worked on, kind of show off their project, answer some questions. And we have about 7 teams, so each team will get about 15 minutes to discuss, respond to questions, talk about maybe some challenges they faced, and that sort of thing. So make sure that you guys are all prepared to come up here and talk about your projects next Wednesday during lab, which means it's only about a week and a half away, right? So you really want to be thinking about the next week and a half finishing up and getting yourself to a demoable state, right? A spot where you can actually showcase off your demo. So it's important to think about what makes a good demo, right? It should work. So make sure that whatever you're actually going to demonstrate, you've tested it beforehand and you've done like a practice run. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I'll just do this and it'll be fine. And sometimes you get up here and you try it out and it doesn't work, and that never reflects too well. So make sure you do a practice run through that give it, maybe give it to your friend or give it to each other. Make sure that you can run through it and it all works. It's also interesting to have like a compelling story. So talk to the audience, right? Why are they interested? Explain maybe why they could use this application, how it's relevant to them, and then walk them through maybe some of those things. So, right, things to consider are the audience, why they care, why they should pay attention to your demonstration. Demonstrate the application, right? The things that you did, go ahead and do it. Maybe also talk about the next steps. So saying, now that we've done this, if we had more time, the next steps would then be doing this, or if we found traction with users, we could then add on this more functionality. Right, so think about the demonstration, about a whole entire presentation, and make it convincing. After that, then we have our public demo day, which is Saturday, August 12th, and I posted the details in the Slack group. It'll be Saturday, August 12th from 2 to 5:30. The venue has been selected. It's the NT House. We'll send out the details. But make sure that you can come and you can stay the whole time, 2 to 5:30. We'll have a chance for people to walk around. The public can walk around and ask questions of your project, and you can explain the project to different groups. There will be some judges who you will try your best to impress. There will be some significant prize money attached to the grand prize. And we're not talking about some small, we're talking about hundreds of dollars, I think, or maybe $1,000. So $1,000. So right, $1,000 is not insignificant amount of money for anyone. So really can think about how you can impress your judges. And the judges looking at all angles. They're looking at which demo is good, right? So from a technical side, which demo is complete, is put together, it's well architected and well designed, it's well thought out, and also which idea is convincing, right? So try to sell your idea well. You talk about your users, what they would use out of it. If you have some user research to back up the decisions you've made. So for example, you might say, we talked to some people and they all wanted to see this feature implemented, so we went ahead and built that feature. Right? That supports the decisions you made, and that could be a convincing argument to explain to judges. One thing to note is the judges will be judging across all the classes. So there's currently 4 classes. There's the Ruby on Rails class, which is us. There's a React Native and Android, and a Swift class. So the other 3 classes are all mobile, which means they're very similar. So we get the benefit of being the standout class. Right? We built out a complete web applications. The other classes are just more of like a mobile client. They don't really have a backend, and so that kind of limits what they can do. So that really gives us the opportunity to shine here, because we can take in data, create users, have a backend, have a database system, have persistence, right, and build out essentially a fully functioning app. Some people maybe will get so far so after demo day, the application can stand on its own and maybe start taking in users, right? And that's something that we can build, but the mobile guys can't. So let's really push hard this next week and a half and really, push hard, build out some interesting features, complete the stuff we need to do so we can show it off. Let's get one of the groups in this class to win. If the mobile classes win, I'm going to be extremely disappointed. I'll be brokenhearted. I'll have to fly back to San Francisco with a sense of failure. So please, let's try hard. If you need help, ask away, right? The TAs and I are here to help you with anything. So if you have questions, put it in Slack, email us, or put it in Facebook. If you feel like you want to meet up, message us. We can talk about maybe coming to the office and having some sessions as well. So don't feel like you are on your own on this. Really push hard, put a lot of work into it. And if you need help, please ask. We are here to help you. Let's make sure that we all have a great demo day and that we all really feel confident in the work that we've done. For those of us who want to also potentially look at a job after this, the project is a great way to sell yourself. You can talk to it about potential employers. You can say, I built these things, and that's a great conversation starter. They'll ask you, okay, why did you do it this way? Talk to me through the architecture. Explain to me some parts of the application. Right? It's great if you can say, we had this idea, we implemented the idea, and we carried it all the way through. And that's just a great starting point to talk to a potential employer versus saying, we had this great idea and we did 10% of it. Right? Then they may be thinking, okay, well, this person doesn't quite have maybe the follow through that we're looking for or that motivation. So the more you can complete, the better it is. One other side note is at the demo day, there will be people there who run companies, or there will be hiring managers who potentially are looking to hire engineers for Ruby positions. So the better you can make your demo and the more that you can convey the technical aspects of why you made those decisions to those individuals, the better chance you have of maybe landing an interview. So just keep that in mind as well, that the more work you put in now, it will pay off. It's not just useless work. It'll be useful for the demonstration. It'll be useful for your own personal career trajectory. And it'll be useful for you to learn and really kind of push yourself and see how much you can get out of this class. So hopefully that inspires you a little bit to go home and pull an all-nighter and code and finish up the project tonight. Or maybe inspires you to go to a coffee shop tomorrow and finish it up or something. But don't waste the opportunity to put in as much work. To kind of give you an idea of what some past groups have done, these are the projects from I think 2 sessions ago. You can check it out by going to vote.coderschool.vn. There's all the projects here from the different classes, so the Swift, Android, and Ruby on Rails classes. I believe the group that won was Airbike. This group doesn't mean you should just copy the presentation. For this one, they actually had to do videos. It wasn't like a live demo. We'll be doing live demonstrations, so just something to consider. But if you look at the demo, let's see if we can load this video.
Air credit in which they can buy vouchers from our partner.
It's very loud.
See this through the eyes of.
But they have a pretty sweet UI. They have some convincing stories as to why you should use it. Basically, it's a bike share program. Some graphs, right? If you want to get to the demo, right, you can add in fake data. It doesn't have to be all authentic data, right? So these graphs here, right, distance biked, who is John Apple? Does anyone care? Not really, right? The point, though, is that they have some user went on some trips. They can show that data. And so if you want to create some fake data, using DB seeds or using the faker gem, by all means, go for it. I found an interesting gem today with a very interesting name called Sex It Up. See if we can load this. So essentially, it replaces just placeholder images with like masterpiece images. So essentially, like images from like classic artwork. So you can pass in like a search term. So they say it was pass in a dog. It'll essentially load like a classic artwork piece. So it loads in this image of a dog or a cat. And it does that basically using a Google search. So every time you load it in, it'll you add in the gem. You can prefetch a bunch of terms if you want. You can pass in some terms, and it'll basically do a Google search, come back with some images, right? So think about adding in either some fake data or maybe some in real time just fetching some data, but not just having kind of just the standard placeholder. Maybe making some interesting ways of adding in your data so that it looks interesting for the demonstration. Any questions on the demo or the group projects? Sweet. So one last thing is, by this week, by lab, you'll be submitting the second milestone. So go here to week 6 to submit. So week 6 under group, right? You'll see the submit button. This is what's due before lab. So here's the deliverable before July 24th, which is this Wednesday. I guess that's today. But this will be due before Wednesday's lab. Make sure you, again, submit your GitHub, create an issue, go ahead and complete it, and attach a GIF so that we can check in on your progress, make sure you're on the right path, and just kind of have some milestones to make sure that we're actually going ahead and working. Don't just wait until the weekend to cram and finish it, because then things could go wrong. So this is just to help us and help you kind of enforce consistent work along the way, so you're not waiting to the very end to do all the work. Okay? So make sure that you guys submit this before Wednesday's lab. Alrighty, so this week we're going to touch upon just a variety of things. We're going to do a few more Heroku commands. We did some last week with some add-ons, adding in Redis. Talk about maybe some useful gems, maybe some relationships, and then we'll talk about at the end building your own Ruby gem. So let's get going. This was the same thing we had last week, and we'll create a new branch. Lecture 7 live. Great. So kind of refresh last week, right? We added some Heroku add-ons, and we added in Postgres, which came standard after doing a git push. And we had the Redis cloud, which we added in. We also had our Heroku config, right? So this was how Heroku loads in environment variables, right? In the lab last week, we had an env file, which was a way to load in environment variables locally. We wanted to make sure we didn't commit that to Git, because you don't want to commit your secrets to Git. So this is how we do it in production. We have our variables here, right? We have our database URL. We added in a Redis cloud URL to hook up to Redis. And the way we did that then in cool. So the way then we configure that is in our cable.yaml, right, which is our WebSockets. We need to connect that to Redis. So we supplied here, right, loading in from the environment. We said, all right, go ahead and fetch from the environment the Redis cloud URL. If we wanted to, we could provide a backup, right? Let's say, for some reason, maybe Redis cloud URL isn't there. So we could say, like Redis URL or something, right? Standard Ruby, but this way we can load it in. And we then added in the proc file. So, right, we had this proc file here, which tells Heroku what type of dyno types we want, right? So the dyno type essentially is a standalone server that Heroku offers to us. We've always had the web. Just by pushing, Heroku recognizes we're a Rails application, and it gives us that web dyno. But this time we also want a background worker for our sidekick jobs. So we added in a worker here, bundle exec sidekick for production. So then when we actually push, we'll actually go ahead and create that worker. So then if we look at the Heroku UI, web interface, we'll load it here. We'll see here now dyno formation, right? It recognizes from our proc file the different types of dynos we want. It's a little faint text, but hopefully you guys can see that. And the release command gets run anytime we do a git push Heroku. So if you can add in this command to basically run your migrations every time you push, so that you don't have the chance you forget and now your DB is out of date. As you start to get more mature, maybe you don't need this command, but early on it's very useful. One thing we've got to do last time is actually turn on the workers. So we have to configure the dynos, and we basically have to turn this on. And with all things Heroku, you can also do it through the command line. So Heroku ps scale, and we'll see here that we have essentially one web dyno at the free tier, and we have nothing else. So I believe we can do Heroku ps scale worker. You can do worker plus 1 or worker equals 1. Scaling dynos. Great. So now if we run it again, we will see that we have hopefully one web. Yep. So we have a web dyno and a worker. And if we want to just confirm that, we can also just refresh the UI, check it out. And here we go. Now it looks like we're back on and our worker is running. So this is our application, right? We'll just make sure it's up and running. Great. We have our chat room. Lecture 7. And we're using Sidekick this time, so it send out the job, background job. It's loaded in as a WebSocket request, so it gets pushed to all the clients. And last time, remember, we also had the Sidekick UI So if we wanted to inspect the jobs, we can make sure it looks like we have no more jobs. All of them have been processed, which is pretty neat. So things are working as expected. So now that we have Redis set up, right, we have our application in production. It's out there. How do we kind of keep track of it? What happens if user experiences an error or a user has an issue? And last time we used Heroku logs, right, and we can tail them. And this gives us kind of just a running thread of all the different logs coming through. But that's not great because it's only really in real time. We can see all the logs. But what if a user writes in and says, hey, this morning I had an issue, this thing happened, right? How do we kind of inspect it? Or maybe we want to get a notification, hey, this user tried to do something, but they couldn't, right? There's an error at the application. Maybe we want some tools to do that. So with all things, Heroku provides add-ons for a lot of this functionality. So first we're going to talk about logging. So we want to add in an add-on, and we want to say Heroku add-ons, add-ons create, and we're going to go ahead and add in paper trail. And we'll notice here it'll go ahead and add in paper trail for us, and it'll create API token. So if we check out Heroku config, we see now a paper trail API token. And let's inspect the add-ons, right? Docs, and we'll check out paper trail. So we'll inspect the documentation and see how to configure it. Great, so paper trail is a log management system. Heroku has a thing called a logplex. The logplex is essentially what we're seeing here. It takes all the logs from different dyno types and aggregates them into one stream. So here we have the logs from the workers, right, which is one dyno or server. We have the logs from the web. We also get in the Heroku router. So these are just like the network layer requests that Heroku automatically routes for us. And all of that gets kind of combined in the Heroku logplex. And we can then stream that logplex and put it in some tool. So paper trail is a way to kind of handle those logs. It kind of stores them all in one place and gives you a way to access them, to query them, and you can go back and look at them. So there's many ways it says here to open and access your logs. Looks like setting it up, all we have to do is run Heroku add-ons create, which we just did. Fantastic. I think that's all we need. So let's see if we can open up Heroku add-ons, right? And go to the dashboard. We say open paper trail. Oops. I had the wrong command typed in. So essentially, right, the goal is to stream this log output and put it somewhere we can search upon it and use it. Great, so here is our application, and we just launched it, so we don't have any events. Let's see if we can go and create some. All right, we'll just create some logs, send out some messages, and now we start to see some logs coming through. All right, this is pretty neat. It says oldest event, so it's like, we kind of reached the beginning of the log stream. But now here we have all of the Heroku logs. It's very similar to how we saw it in the command line, but the main difference is we can start to search. So we can search, maybe say, like status 500, and say, did anyone hit a status 500 event? Oh, nothing happened. Great. That means we've done something pretty well. Maybe status 200. No, nothing. Maybe the command is wrong. Let's see if we have any router requests. We can just search for router. Looks like our search. Okay, so it looks like they have some different ways of searching that I'm not quite doing properly. But it essentially gives you a way to look at your logs and kind of query them and kind of get access to them over time. So if you want to, user says, hey, this morning I had an issue, you can start to go in and inspect it. What our dashboard looks like. So I think you can configure it so that it keeps track of all your deploys, platform errors, scheduler jobs. So pretty configurable. You can even set alerts on it. so that if there's an alert, you can have some sort of matching pattern. It'll send you an email, and maybe you get one once a day or something, or every time. So pretty neat to kind of use. If we want to do it locally, right? Where do the logs get written to? Well, if we inspect our directory, you notice there's a log file, right? So if we go into the log file, we'll notice that there's a development log. And so when we run Rails server locally, right, the logs get written to this file, development.log. And so if we want to inspect the logs locally, this is a great way to do it. If we want to inspect them on production, Heroku out of the box doesn't provide any log management system, but Papertrail is a great add-on that lets you do it. And just to check out the pricing tiers, they also offer a free version, which is great. So let's see here. Yeah, so the most basic version is free, right? And you get log volume 10 megabytes per day, and it stores them for up to 2 days. So you can go back and check them out. That's pretty good for a free tier. Then they offer more if you want to go beyond that as you scale. That's not quite needed. So we'll inspect our add-ons. Right? A bunch of add-ons all in the free tier. This is fantastic. So now we've set up a log management system. Very useful, again, if we want to go through and look at our logs, because Heroku doesn't store them by default. Right? If you kind of inspect the Heroku UI here, right, there's really not much. There's a metrics tab, but it's only available if you pay for it. The activity is just like deployments. So I would recommend using Papertrail to kind of inspect the logs coming out of your application. Great. So that's a great one to use. Another one that's worth checking out is error management. So let's say we have an error pop up, a user can't log in, they have an issue. We really want a way to track that and a way to kind of dig in and maybe see what the user is doing, what the error was, and maybe start to fix them. So with that in mind, let's check out an add-on called Rollbar. Rollbar is great for error management. There are others as well. See if I can show you a list. Let's see, errors and exceptions. So Airbreak, Honey Badger, Bugsnag. Rollbar is great because they also offer a free tier. My company uses Bugsnag, but essentially anytime there's like a stack trace, Bugsnag will capture it and create an error. Very useful, but I think their pricing is a little more expensive. Rollbar is a free tier, which is pretty handy. So the way to provision it with all things, right? You want to create your add-on, and we want to use the free tier. So we'll go ahead and do that command. While that's running, it says it'll create an access token. So we have to get the access token, and we can add it locally if we want to go to let our local environment errors go to Rollbar. So it gives you the option if you have an error while maybe building it locally, it'll capture it in Rollbar. We don't necessarily need that, but it's an option. So here we go. We have some access tokens and some endpoints. So let's just grep for them and see what they are. Great, we have access token and our endpoints. And is there a getting started guide? Provisioning. Cool. Looks like it should be fully integrated. So let's see if we can do add-on open Rollbar. Let's see. So we have Ruby. So it looks like add us a gem to the application gem file. So we'll go ahead and do that. All things, we'll then run bundle. Go install that. It looks like our next command is, it also recommends using OJ for serialization. So run bundle again. and then Rails generate roll bar. Oops, what was the output of the bundle? I cleared the error too quickly. Let's see what bundle said. Looks like the version they use is outdated, so I'm just going to go ahead and clear out that part. Cool. And then Rails generate roll bar. This will generate for us some just basic config files and whatnot. Let's see. Great, so it wanted me to run with an access token, but we already installed it with Heroku, right? And just to confirm, right, it's looking for a roll bar access token. We already have that with Heroku. Great, so one thing it also did was it created this config file. So you can kind of just hook it up with your account, different options. So if you want to also do reporting on Sidekick, you can go ahead and comment this. You could pass in some custom data, so lots of options. Here it's disabling it in test. And the reason that they want me to run this command is they also let you, if you have an error when you're running it locally, it'll push that error to roll bar. I'm not as interested because I don't really want all of my development errors to go to roll bar. I'm going to worry about production. So I'll say, if it's also a development environment, go ahead and just disable it, right? No need to run it locally. We really care about the Heroku environment and the production. So we can save that. Then what are we going to do? Go ahead and add them. Add roll bar. What do we do? Git push, right? Heroku. And want to push our branch, which is lecture 7 live, to master. And it'll push for us. In the meantime, we can inspect the rest. It looks like that's all we need. So we completed the setup for roll bar. Here it's installing our new gems. Great. Right? Fantastic. Heroku setting up. And remember how we had that release command? So it'll run the release command, which is rake db migrate after we deploy. And there's a way to actually test roll bar and make sure it's working. Let's see if we can find the... I don't know if the documentation is here. But I believe we can run Heroku run rake roll bar test. And it should just throw an error, and we can start to see if this gets captured by roll bar. So when you run Heroku run, it spins up a dyno just for this one process. So we have our web dyno and our worker dynos. The web dyno runs traffic to the web server. The worker dyno runs traffic for the background jobs. And Heroku run just creates an independent dyno for the one process here. It looks like great. So the goal was to create an error to capture, and it looks like success. So reporting exception, testing roll bar. If you can see this, it works. Fantastic. So it looks like our test was a success. And I want to now go at the error and look at the error. So I'm going to open up roll bar. And let's see if I can get some information about the error. So we'll go ahead and open it up. And it looks like here we had one error. Roll bar testing exception. So we had an error. Essentially, here's kind of where it was, what the information was, when it happened, how often it happens. So if multiple users are hitting the same error, we'll kind of capture that information in these graphs. I could comment here, right? Comment, and resolve. Let's say it's an open error. I actually want to fix it. I could assign it to someone. I could say, all right, this error exists. I don't want to assign it to myself, and I'll fix it. Or maybe I want to just watch it and add someone as a watcher. And then when it's finally done, I can resolve it. Use this to start to keep track of your errors. So it provides quite a lot of functionality around looking at your errors, seeing what the errors actually are, and starting to maybe fix them and track when they're actually fixed. So rollbar is another great tool to add to Heroku to kind of keep track of errors users are hitting, ways to fix them, and how to start resolving those errors and actually going ahead and pushing out changes. Great. So those are 2 more add-ons I wanted to cover. And just finally to confirm that we added them in, we run Heroku add-ons and we see them here. Fantastic. So now we have a pretty full-fledged production, right? We have pushed to production. We have our account up and running. We added in some background workers. We have active job running, and we have some add-ons here, which kind of help us keep track of the Heroku environment and fix issues as they come up. But let's say now we start to get users. Users are liking your application. It's going pretty well, but we want to test things out via Heroku, right? So we test out locally, it works, but we're still not entirely convinced that it'll work if we deploy, right? Maybe we deploy and things weren't configured exactly right, and the application breaks, and now users start to get mad. So we maybe want to have a separate Heroku environment that lets us test it out outside of production. And production also has user data. Maybe we want to test it out, but we don't want to impact user data. We want to maybe have some seed data, have some fake data, and run some tests. So what we need essentially is a second Heroku environment to test things out. And we can do that with Heroku fork. So we're going to do Heroku fork from, and this is, we actually need the name of our application. So it's going to be quiet scrubland, yada, yada, yada. We're going to fork it from here. And we're going to want to create a second Heroku environment to push to so we can basically test things out. So let's say we say chat app staging, right? So we want a staging application. Oh, it looks like it deprecated. It will be sunset soon. So it's still going to work, but there's a new command. Let's see what the new command looks like. Review apps. Okay, so it looks like they're kind of changing it to more pipelines. I know Heroku added in like a pipeline, so you could push to one and then have it the same code be sent to the pipeline to production. So it looks like things might be changing a little bit with Heroku pipelines. But the concept is still the same, right? You want a separate Heroku account or a separate Heroku environment so you can test things out. This fork command is pretty useful because it will copy over all of our add-ons as well. So you notice here that it won't copy them over de facto, right? It doesn't do just a simple copy-paste, but it adds in the add-ons and creates new environment variables. So that means it'll create a new rollbar account with new API keys. It'll create a new database for us, again with new API keys. So the API keys aren't the same between the two. It'll copy over the API keys that are the same. It'll copy them over. And so now it looks like it's available at chat app staging. So now if we want to look at our application, right, how do we do that? Before we just did Heroku config. Well, now we really can't do that because if we type that in, there's 2 environments. How does it know which one to look at? It'll default to the one we had before, but we really want to look at the new one. So we can run Heroku config, and then we can type in the app, and we add chat app staging. And now to give us the config for our new chat app. And we'll notice here, if we compare the two, right, some things are different. So database URL, right, different because it's a different database. So different username, different password, different machine even because it's an entirely separate Heroku account. Some things are the same. So we're still an English application. It says here the Rails environment is production. If we want to, we can define our own Rails environment. So we can start to set, Heroku config set Rails environment equals like staging, for example, if we want to have a separate thing. And then we can define in the code what staging looks like. Some things are the same, right? So serve static files, enabled. But Redis, again, different Redis account, so it's different API keys. So pretty handy. Now that we have it set up though, right, how do we deploy? So if we look at before, we have get remote, right? We have Heroku and Origin, and Heroku points us to our now existing production account. So we want to rename that. We want to name get remote rename, and we want to name Heroku to production. So now if we run, we'll see now it's production, right? So now we went ahead and called our old environment production, and we want to add in the new environment. So I believe the way we can do that is Heroku get remote, and then we want to add in the application. So you can do dash dash app. You also can just do dash a, same thing. And we said chat app staging. Great. Now if we look at our remote again, we'll see now we have origin, which is our actual GitHub, right? That's where we want to store our code. We have production, and it added in our new staging as Heroku. That's all right, but we want to rename that. So git remote rename Heroku staging. Cool. So now when I inspect our remote, we have origin, we have production, we have staging. Fantastic. So now that we created it, right, let's go ahead and push. So git push. And before we did git push Heroku, because that was the name of our remote for Git, now it's staging, right? We want to push to staging, and I want to push lecture 7. Actually, let's make sure first we have nothing outstanding. Cool. Lecture 7 live to master. Great, so now we can have a staging application and a production application. So we can test it out in staging. Maybe before we release to production, we'll push it to staging. We'll add in some data, make sure we can log in, do all the sort of things we want to do. If we have a QA process, we can do the QA process on staging. Once it's ready to go, we can then push it to production and enable it for our users. So Heroku provides a lot of nice tools around creating these multiple Heroku environments. Still same code base, right? So one code base. They're still tied to the same account. And if I look at my applications, now we'll see a new application. Yep, we'll see the new one for chat app staging, right? The code's being pushed, and it's going to build it. This is the first time we're pushing it, so it will take a little longer to actually go ahead and build all the static assets and push those. But now our application has the same add-ons up and running, and that's pretty handy. So once we start to get users, we can still test on Heroku without having to affect the users using our application on production. Is that clear to everyone? Great, so it looks like we had it up and running. Final thing is we got to make sure it's configured properly, so with our dynos. So we can do dash app, chat app staging. All right, but let's say I forget the name of our production application, and I don't really want to, right, I forget the name of it. I don't quite remember what it is. You also can do Heroku remote, and we called it production. And it'll find the name from git remote and use that as well. So, right, it essentially grabs the name from git remote, right, this production right here. So if you forget the name of the application, you can pass it in as -- app, or you can pass in the git remote name. So we want to say Heroku PS scale worker +1, and to demonstrate the other one, we'll use remote, and the name of ours is staging. Great. So now if we just confirm that, we'll see now that we have a worker and a web dyno. Great. So that is an overview of all the Heroku commands that are pretty useful, right? So adding in add-ons, setting it up, configuring your workers, forking it to a separate environment. Any questions on Heroku management? Alrighty, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll keep going with some more stuff.